What if the most dangerous man in the room isn't the villain? It's the good guy who just won't act? What if God's harshest judgment wasn't reserved for the most wicked king, the most bloodthirsty warrior, or the most shameless idolater, but for a gentle, soft-spoken priest who loved God, served faithfully, and simply couldn't bring himself to discipline his own sons? Today, we're talking about Eli, High Priest of Israel, mentor to one of the greatest prophets who ever lived, and the man whose silence was so catastrophic it nearly destroyed Israel's entire religious system from the inside out. By the end of this video, you're going to look at passive leadership and quiet tolerance of wrongdoing in a completely different way. These are the types of content I create. If you're interested, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss upcoming videos. This is the lineage chain of Eli: Levi, Kohath, Amram, Aaron. Then from Ithamar's line came Eli. Eli wasn't a villain. Let's get that straight from the beginning. He was the high priest at Shiloh, the most spiritually powerful position in all of Israel. He served God, he knew the law, he even raised Samuel, the boy who would become one of Israel's most extraordinary prophets. But Eli had two biological sons, Hophni and Phinehas, and these two men were an absolute catastrophe in priestly robes. They were wicked, the original corrupt clergy. These two had basically turned God's altar into their personal buffet. If someone offers a sacrifice to God, before the offering is even properly made, Eli's boys send their servants over to fish out the best cuts of meat for themselves. Eli ate his share in lawful priestly portion, but let his sons take excessive prime cuts. They claim whatever they want, like it was an all-you-can-eat buffet. If you tried to insist on doing things God's way, they basically said, "Hand it over now," or else. Their behavior wasn't just rude. It was a massive spiritual scandal in God's eyes. No negotiation, no apology, pure, unfiltered religious thuggery. These weren't occasional slip-ups or moments of weakness. This was a fully organized operation running inside the holiest place in Israel, God's verdict. This sin was extremely serious in the Lord's sight. They weren't just stealing meat, they were robbing people of their worship and doing it in God's name. The Bible doesn't sugarcoat it. It calls them scoundrels who had no regard for the Lord. Their sin is extremely serious in the Lord's sight because they treated the offerings to the Lord with such disrespect. But it gets worse. They were sleeping with women who served at the entrance of the tent of the Lord's presence, the holiest site in Israel, the heaven meets earth spot. Not somewhere sketchy across town or in some back alley. They turned the holiest place into their personal hookup zone. By the time it reaches Eli's ears, it's already a widely known pattern. Everybody knew. The whole nation knew. And Eli, he had a little chat with his sons. But here's what nobody talks about. Eli's confrontation with his sons goes like this. "Hey guys, people are talking. I'm hearing bad things about you. You really shouldn't do this." That's it. No removal from ministry, no consequences, no suspension, no action. Just a disappointed dad's speech that probably lasted 5 minutes. No fierceness despite the gravity of the sin. He rebuked them, but he did not ensure they would change. He even threw in a theological warning: if you sin against God, who will defend you? Which sounds profound but landed with the impact of a wet napkin. Just a mild rebuke. No dent or scratch was made whatsoever. Zero impact. The result? His sons completely ignored him. Didn't flinch. Didn't slow down. Business as usual. And here's the chilling part. They would not listen to their father, for the Lord had decided to kill them. The window had already closed. The verdict was already in. There are those who believe in every whisper, and there are those who don't seem to bother much. The question is, what can we gain from this? A prophet from the Lord tells Eli, Why do you honor your sons more than me? That line should stop you cold. Eli wasn't accused of worshiping Baal. He wasn't accused of murder or theft. His love for his children had quietly become his weakness, and he probably never even realized it. He doesn't have the guts to tell them bluntly, "If you do this again, you're fired." He warned them just for the sake of saying he warned them. Here's the thing about passive leadership that nobody tells you. It doesn't feel like failure while it's happening. It feels like grace. It feels like patience. It feels like giving people another chance. But when tolerance of evil becomes your permanent strategy, that's not grace anymore. That's negligence with a religious costume on. The manner in which he raised his sons presents a significant issue. He believed he was demonstrating love for them, but in his quest for honor, respect, and perhaps even fear, he failed to impart essential lessons. As both a parent and an elder priest, his reputation should have set the standard. However, he struggled to convey this to his sons. He allowed them the freedom to act as they pleased. When they disregarded verbal warnings, he should have enforced disciplinary measures. This, indeed, is a true expression of love. If you want to expand your thinking and deepen your understanding, come and let's delve together into meaningful studies and find the answer to the question, is it true? God didn't just snap one day and revoke Eli's priestly dynasty. He actually gave warnings before dropping the final verdict. Warning number 1 came from an unnamed prophet who showed up at Eli's door with a message. Remember when God chose your family for the priesthood? And ended with a devastatingly blunt, "That's over now." The specifics were brutal. No more old men in Eli's family line, descendants dying in their prime. The priestly dynasty is gone, not suspended, not on probation, gone. God's summarizing principle: those who honor me, I will honor, but those who despise me will be disdained. Simple, unambiguous, devastating. But apparently one prophetic warning wasn't enough, because God came back, warning number 2 through young Samuel to confirm the same judgment. And this time he added something that should make every leader uncomfortable. The guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering. Not fixable, not reversible, past the point of no return. 2 warnings, 2 messengers, 1 outcome. God wasn't being impulsive, he was being patient. And Eli used every second of that patience to do absolutely nothing. His sons blasphemed God, and he allowed sacrilege at the sanctuary by failing to restrain them from their blatant abuses. This passive permission profaned holy offerings and space. God had originally promised Eli's family the priesthood forever, and he revoked it because of his 2 sons' grave sins and his silence. And here's the part that genuinely disturbs me. When Eli hears this prophecy, his response is almost eerily calm. He simply says, "He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes." Was that deep faith? Or was it a man who knew, deep down, that the judgment was deserved? This next part changed everything for me. The day everything collapsed, Israel goes to war against the Philistines. They're losing badly, so the elders decide to bring the Ark of the Covenant onto the battlefield like a lucky charm. Hophni and Phinehas were there with the Ark, as if God's most sacred object were some kind of spiritual weapon they could weaponize on demand. It didn't work. Israel is devastated, 30,000 soldiers die, and Hophni and Phinehas were both killed in battle, same day, just as prophesied. A messenger runs back to Shiloh with the news. He tells Eli, "Your sons are dead." Eli absorbs that. But when the messenger delivers the final blow, the Ark of God has been captured, Eli, 98 years old and fat, falls backward off his chair, breaks his neck, and dies. Think about that. His sons' deaths didn't kill him, but losing the Ark did. Maybe in that moment, Eli finally understood the full weight of everything he'd allowed. The sons he'd protected had cost his family's priestly dynasty. Ditch the time sucks clickbait with their sparkle and fizzle vids. Our channel, your sneaky addiction to epic, deep dive stories that'll hook you hard. Stick around or snooze on empty calories, on scrolls you'll regret. Meanwhile, inside the same household where all this corruption was happening, a young boy named Samuel was quietly growing in favor with God and man. Eli had accidentally mentored his own replacement. The boy who would deliver God's judgment against his family was sleeping under his roof. There is something almost unbearably ironic about that. So what do we take from this? Eli wasn't evil, he was passive. And in God's sight, when you're in a position of leadership, passive tolerance of evil isn't neutrality, it's participation. He had the authority to remove his sons. He had the position. He had the warning, not once but twice. And every time, he chose comfort over courage. Every time, he protected his family's reputation over God's honor. The dynasty didn't fall because of Hophni and Phinehas alone. It fell because their father decided that keeping the peace at home was worth more than upholding the standard of God. Eli was basically the reliable, long-serving manager of Israel's spiritual headquarters. No miracles, no epic battles, no jaw-dropping prophecies. Just 40 steady years holding down the fort at Shiloh while everything around him was chaos. His greatest hits? He blessed Hannah, the mother of Samuel, when everyone else probably just told her to stop crying, and that one moment of kindness literally produced Samuel. He also raised and trained Samuel, which is honestly impressive considering his own sons were out here making a complete mockery of the priesthood. So yeah, Eli's legacy is essentially great mentor, great judge, and terrible dad. The man stewarded Israel's most sacred space for 4 decades and still couldn't get his own house in order. Good resume, messy footnotes. The Bible doesn't mince words when it comes to discipline. Here's the bluntest parenting truth you'll ever read. Whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. Let that sink in. According to Scripture, refusing to discipline your child isn't kindness. It's neglect dressed up as love. It repeats, do not withhold discipline from a child. Punish them with the rod and save them from death. And folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far from them. The pattern is impossible to miss. Scripture consistently connects real love with real correction. Not harsh cruelty, not blind rage, but deliberate, intentional discipline that actually cares enough about a child's future to risk their momentary comfort today. Eli had every one of these warnings available to him. He knew the law, he taught the law, he just never applied it at home. And that right there is the tragedy. So here's the question I want to leave with you today. Not about Eli, about you. Are there things you're tolerating right now in your home, your leadership, your circle, that you know in your gut need to be confronted? Are you giving them a gentle word when the situation calls for decisive action? Because here's what Eli's story screams across 3,000 years of history. Silence has consequences, and sometimes those consequences outlast you. The rod and rebuke bestow wisdom, but an undisciplined child brings shame to his mother. And the philosopher Edmund Burke, centuries later, arrived at the same truth from a completely different direction. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Eli was a good man. He just did nothing to control his sons, and a priestly dynasty, a promise, collapsed because of it. Don't let that be your story. Open up your mind and further enrich your understanding of well-researched knowledge, which is the foundation of true wisdom. Remember, it's essential to select content that offers something of value.